Welcome back to the Full View. Now, a cable repair team has been dispatched to respond to the damaged ACE or ACE as well as WACS WACS subsea cables. This after damage to the cables near the Ivory Coast caused disruptions for internet users here in South Africa. Now, there were fewer outage reports on many platforms by Friday, and 9 undersea cables make the internet work here in South Africa, and 4 of those are currently said to be damaged. Mr. Arthur Goldstuck, CEO of World Wide Worx, joins us for more clarity. Arthur, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Look, I bet many did not know what caused the outage, nor even the fact that we have undersea cables that enable our internet to work. And I'm pretty sure now the question is, we have our own very Wi-Fi and fiber cables. How is it that we do have to rely on these undersea cables to have functional internet?
Thanks, Alicia. These undersea cables connect our internet to the world. The problem is that a lot of companies that are based locally are also connecting their systems to the global internet, and often the traffic is rerouted. In fact, when we call up many of the local websites, or that we think are local, the request is going to, let's say, New York, and then the answer comes back to South Africa, and then the website is delivered to New York and back to us.
What?
That kind of thing. Usually, efficient network planning avoids that sort of round trip for the data, but when it's an international site or service, like Netflix, for example, which went down when that break happened, then we depend heavily on the international connectivity. There's a lot of what they call local hosting or local peering, which means that the main content being delivered from those websites tends to be hosted locally as well. But we can see when there's a breakage like this that it doesn't quite work, and suddenly all these services go down, especially when you rely on live access, like with email, for example, and Microsoft in the cloud. That's a global service that you are depending on. So when Microsoft goes down in one place, it goes down everywhere. And when a cable breaks that is connecting, let's say, our Outlook email or our Google Gmail email from South Africa to their hosts in the United States, then it doesn't matter that there's local hosting. It's being, the live email is coming via the United States, and that means suddenly we don't have email.
This is very interesting, Arthur. I mean, speaking of that local hosting, I understand that internet service providers here actually enter into an agreement to purchase bandwidth or multiple cables in order to avoid these serious service interruptions in case, of course, of cable breaks. But how exactly does this work then?
Alicia, the whole idea of going onto multiple cables is to avoid the situation when one cable breaks, that you're not suddenly cut off. So you will, for example, have capacity on the West Africa cable system, the WACS cable, and then you'll also have capacity on the ACE cable, the Africa Coast to Europe cable, because you figure if one goes down, then at least I'll switch over to the other. But 4 of the major cables linking West Africa and Southern Africa to the world were cut at the same time. So that's because they follow the same undersea route, and they were obviously subjected to the same incident that happened underwater. Probably an undersea earthquake, although I haven't seen reports on that. It could even have been a ship's anchor, depending how deep those cables were running. If they were near the coast, then it's a very good chance it was a ship anchor that actually broke the cables. But they were all obviously running very close to each other. If that happened, it's more likely to be something like an undersea earthquake or a rock fall underwater, because we forget that the seabed is actually mountain ranges as well. It's like the surface, it's very uneven. And in a mountain range, you have rock falls. So if they're running these cables in the shortest possible route and it's going through an undersea mountain valley and there's a rock fall, then suddenly all those cables get severed. But just to explain quickly, what should happen is that one should have backup on cables running along different routes. So there's cables running up the east coast of Africa that many companies also double up on. So they will have one up the east coast, one up the west coast. The problem this time is that the Seacom cable that runs up the east coast connects to Europe through the Red Sea. And 4 cables in the Red Sea were cut at the same time as well. A couple of weeks ago by the Houthi rebels in Yemen, who were bombing ships in the Red Sea. And one of the cargo ships that they sunk severed 4 cables, including the Seacom cable. And they can't get a permit to fix that cable. So it's still out of commission. So that traffic is being rerouted via other cables under the Indian Ocean. So you're kind of caught between a rock and the deep blue sea, so to speak.
Absolutely. Very interesting indeed, Arthur. Now, what are some of the major effects? I mean, you've just mentioned one with the shipping issues of, the effects of such an outage. And just how serious is it then? Yes, many couldn't access their emails and the workday was slightly disrupted, but it could have far-reaching implications, right? There has been a lot of hacks that have been reported and happening at even high-level institutions like your credit bureaus, where suspects have said to be were said to be in possession of critical as well as private information. So could such an outage actually threaten national security, especially if we cannot control it?
Yes, it can. A fascinating exercise is to look at a site called Down Detector. And that's a global site that tells you if any specific site has gone down based on reports of people not being able to access the site. And normally you would do it on a site-by-site basis. But you can actually look at all the most popular sites in South Africa by going to downdetector.co.za, and you discover the range of sites that are affected by this kind of outage. You can even now see, if you go to that page, you can see jagged lines under many of the most popular sites, like Netflix, Gmail, Twitter or X, Vumatel, Vodacom, Microsoft 365. LinkedIn is now coming right, but for a few days, LinkedIn was also hard to access. MTN, Vodacom, Cell C, and then the banks, FNB and Capitec in particular, were affected. And you'll be amazed by this, but even gamers are severely affected. So Discord, which is a very popular sharing platform amongst gamers, was affected. Electronic Arts, Blizzard, 2 of the biggest games publishers in the country, and also Call of Duty, which is played online. Many people couldn't access that for a while, and they're still up and down at the moment.
Very interesting, Arthur. I know I'm out of time, but I mean, very quickly, just your quick word on the call to ban TikTok in the US. How do you think, if this succeeds, will have a general impact for users, if any?
I think it's going to be hard fought. It's been passed by one of the American houses. It still has to go to the Senate, and there's a strong belief that it won't pass through the Senate for various reasons, because it's a badly conceived regulation, and simply banning a service like that because it's owned by a company in a country that's an adversary of the United States is a pretty poor reason. But if it does get banned, chances are it's going to be a limited kind of ban, and it may affect some Americans. Those working for government or the military in America certainly won't be allowed to access it. It won't affect South Africans immediately. But there is also an attempt to try to force ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, to actually sell TikTok. It's quite a bizarre demand to say you have to sell your prize asset to an American company. But it's possible. And chances are that TikTok will still carry on running, but its nature may change a little.
Arthur, thank you so much for your insight there. That is Mr. Arthur Goldstuck, the CEO of World Wide Worx.